Hello, and welcome to Building High Performance Cultures, a weekly series where we talk with executives from top organizations on how they build high performance cultures and how they're leveraging their culture as competitive advantage. I'm Marty Parker, the President and CEO of Waterstone Human Capital, and my guest today is the Executive Director of the Waterstone Culture Institute, Nicole Bendaly. Nicole, welcome to Building High Performance Cultures.
Thanks, Marty. I'm happy to be here with you.
More importantly, welcome to Waterstone.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, a little bit about Nicole. Nicole's been helping organizations bring out the best in their people for, can I say it, Nicole, over 25 years. You wear it well. Her research in organizational behavior began almost 20 years ago, and she now focuses her work on understanding the critical factors to high performance teams and leaders. She applies her knowledge and experience to the development of learning solutions and assessment tools, a number of which are being used in over 200 healthcare and other organizations across North America to successfully change how people work together for the better. Now, Nicole is also a dynamic speaker and facilitator on topics impacting organizational performance, all of which help people tap into the best of themselves and those with whom they work. She is co-author of Improving Healthcare Team Performance, the 7 Requirements of Excellence in Patient Care. This is a book that is required reading at Royal Roads University, Queen's University, and the University of Calgary. And of course, she recently joined, as I mentioned, the Waterstone team to help us build our leadership, our learning and development offerings in order to meet the growing demand and new and relevant training tools and programs. Now, Nicole, your background is in organizational behavior. So I'm curious to know, where does culture fit into the organizational behavioral puzzle?
Yeah, great question. So, of course, organizational culture is a system of, to really simplify it, a system of shared assumptions, values, and beliefs. And that help guide how people should show up in the organization, how people can contribute the best given the kind of culture the organization wants to create. And so the word puzzle is actually, I want to sort of build on the use of that analogy. So you pull out a puzzle, right? And usually on the front of the box, you've got the picture of that puzzle and a number of pieces that you need to put together. So there are a number of pieces that need to be put together to create the picture of your ideal culture. And behavior is a really important piece of that. And of course, our assumptions, our values and beliefs drive our behavior. And so when an organization doesn't have a clear picture, a map, right, the picture on the cover of that puzzle box, when we don't know what we're working towards, then it becomes very difficult for individuals to know how they should show up, where they need to shift, where they need to grow. And the organization has a harder time determining how we need to develop, how we need to shift our strategy to support our culture and vice versa. What type of talent should we attract? What kind of character and behaviors do we need from people? And so organizational culture and behavior are so integrally tied that you can't have one without the other.
It's a terrific analogy, frankly. But I'm curious to know, why should, other than the obvious perhaps, organizations adopt a learning culture? And specifically, why should leaders be passionate about learning and development, not just for themselves, but for their teams?
So Marty, I love that you use the term learning. So traditionally we've heard, training and development, and it's really about learning. I believe that there is no such thing as the status quo. If growth isn't happening, deterioration is. And so in order to grow as an organization and as individuals, as teams, we need to learn. And learning and development, if it's not already a part of the culture, if teams aren't already adopting a curious mindset and looking for ways to continuously improve and recognizing the strengths they have and what skills they might need or behaviors they may need to shift, then they will quickly fall behind, and so will the organization. So those organizations that are consistently at the front of the pack ensure learning and development is part of the culture. And learning and development in a formal way with, great programs to help individuals learn the skills and awareness that are needed and attitudes. But also when we have formal programs, then it's more likely that learning and curiosity and some risk taking become part of the way we do things around here. And so organizations can't afford not to prioritize learning and development. And we've seen that in COVID. We know that organizations who adopt a learning mindset, a mindset that is about trying new things and evolving and challenging the status quo and having programming and courses and coaching or whatever that looks like to support that mindset and development, they're more flexible and nimble. So when stuff happens like COVID, those who are part of a learning culture are already ahead of the game because they've built up their toolkit, their sets of skills and behaviors that they can draw on to pivot as needed. So it's a non-negotiable.
You mentioned a few times there the word shift. And so I'm curious to know what shifts you've seen in the way that organizations treat learning and development, possibly in the last 5 to 10 years. That's a long time, I know, but.
Yeah. We've seen a lot of shifts actually. A few big ones are those that get it, okay, prioritize it, right? And so, and by prioritize it, I mean, there are more and more organizations who are not quick to cut learning and development during hard times, right? Because they recognize that their people and the ability of their people is at the heart of their ability as an organization to thrive, and that their culture is a part of that. And so we see a shift in really prioritizing learning and development. I've also seen a shift in how that learning and development is approached. So it's less of a checkbox. Yep, we've got these courses, great, right? And then we've got this catalog, but it's more about the experience and how and ensuring that that learning is turning into action. So it's usually not what we're seeing. High impact isn't coming from a one-time training course, but how does that one training course allow that person to apply that learning over time, and what additional supports are there to turn that learning into action? So we see this more as experiential learning and longer processes that allow for reflection, application, continuous improvement, as opposed to this box of catalog programs that are still effective, but if they're standalone and not connected to what are we trying to achieve here as a culture, then there won't be any real measured improvement towards a longer term goal.
So it's interesting that you mentioned the link to culture. I'm curious now in the application, what shifts on the same theme you've seen in the way practitioners, learning and development professionals approach learning and development.
Right. Well, I mean, shifts about how we teach and facilitate. Look at COVID. I mean, it's crazy, right? And I've been so impressed with how the learning and development industry, the training industry, has been able to pivot and adopt new technology and new ways of collaborating and sharing of ideas and learning together in a virtual situation that isn't ideal, right? Isn't the best way to learn with and from one another. And so we've seen shifts just in the use of technology. I think the biggest, most impactful shifts, which I touched on a minute ago, is the way in which individuals are engaged in that learning. It's now not being done to people, right? It's learning is happening by and through people, right? Through experiential learning, through dialogue, through the belief that the facilitator will meet people where they are at and leverage all of the already great experiences and learning and knowledge they already have internally, and then draw that out and guide them to where they need to be through dialogue, through additional information and knowledge and experiences through the learning process. And so it's a much more engaged experiential approach and no longer ideally the sage on the stage approach, right? Telling people. It's more of an engaged, let's work through this together so people feel ownership of that learning and they don't feel like somebody's coming in to try and fix them.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. What are the most common reasons that you see that leaders turn to kind of the learning and development? And specifically, what are the common or the more common topics that you're asked to support kind of in the broader learning and development landscape?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so a couple of the reasons why, like two main reasons why leaders seek something out, in my experience, is either there's a pain that they want to solve for, right? A recognition that, ooh, I really need to improve this if I want to get better because of a pain that they've experienced, or because of, oh, there's this great opportunity and I really want to learn and evolve, and right? So there's those two reasons. Maybe it's a pain with the team or what have you. And the common areas that I've seen over the past few years, and more so over this past year, come up to the top is one of them in particular is leading self and others through change. That's a big one. And this isn't about project management. This is about supporting people and leading people through change that they and the leader may not agree with or even want to happen, but it's happening. And so how do we get self and others to a place of supporting that change and bringing our best selves to making that change work, regardless of whether we agree with it or not? And that's a big piece, and that affects, lots of different aspects of our organization. So there's the leading change. I also see a huge shift back to, it's always been important, but it's been coming to the top again over the past couple of years, which is high performance team and culture. There's a huge need, and leading change is at the heart of that too, is a big piece of culture. To really enabling teams to be at their very best, and leaders wanting to know how to do that, right? And recognizing that we can't just rely on HR to do this for us. This truly is a team effort in high performance teams. It's the leader and the team. There's a big focus on that. And then finally, communication, and all things communication, whether it's influencing, whether it's, interpersonal relationships and rapport building, which is around influencing. So communication is a big bucket. There's leading self in that, and resilience in that, and learning to respond instead of react. So those were the three big buckets, though: change, building high performance teams and cultures, and communication.
Yeah, and we hear it a lot and see it a lot as well. So that makes perfect sense. Now, on the flip side, what are the common blind spots that you come across when talking, to leaders and learning development professionals, and what can they do about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think one of the most common blind spots is really understanding what it takes to shift culture and what it takes to even shift a team. So if we look at it at the team level, right, that one workshop or two workshops is not going to change behavior. It's just not, right? They are essential, especially a series, right? Those workshops, those sessions, as long as they're designed to address the specific needs and culture of that team, those sessions create new awareness, are amazing to spark dialogue and uncover the root causes and really sort things out and learn with and from one another and understanding each other, gaining new knowledge. They are essential. And the work that happens in between the sessions and long after the sessions are over and we're gone is just as, if not more important. And so I think one of the blind spots is really understanding the commitment and priority that needs to be placed on teamwork and on culture, that it can't be seen as an initiative. It's not a bolt-on. It is part of what we do every day. And the beauty of engaging in a journey, engaging in the high performance teams and culture journey is that it sparks that. It creates the framework and process to operationalize teamwork, to operationalize high performance teams and culture so it becomes part of the team's everyday work and not an add-on that we do once a year or every 6 months or every quarter. It happens in our meetings. It happens in the hallways. It happens all the time. So that's, I think, the biggest blind spot.
Interesting. So these questions kind of align themselves fairly closely. So in your observation and experience, when it comes to building high performance teams and cultures, how can learning and development specifically help on that continuum?
Yeah. I think learning and development, we don't know what we don't know. And so as leaders, right? And as one of the other blind spots that leads into this is that, when a leader picks up the phone, oftentimes it's, well, we need to learn to communicate better. I want some help on communication skills. Mm-hmm. And there's that assumption because that's what they're seeing as the impact, the breakdown in communication. But what a strong learning and development process does is it helps uncover the surface outcomes, like the impacts of poor communication and what's causing the poor communication. What are the root causes? Is it trust, right? Is it baggage that we're holding on to? Is it inaccurate assumptions? Is it EI? Is it, there's so many different things that show up as poor communication that drives that poor communication. And so one of the beauties of learning and development is that the right process first engages the team in the identification of what's working and what's not. Because the leader can have an idea to what's not, but the team also has ideas. And then really getting down into, okay, what's preventing us from really addressing this issue? And a strong learning and development process would uncover all of that with the team and build the skills and awareness and knowledge and behaviors that team needs at that time. And so it's not a cookie cutter approach, right? Learning and development, when it works the best, is localized. It's at the team level and arms the team at the end of the day with the tools and learning that team needs to excel and to create the culture that the organization is striving to create, because every team is going to have their own sets of challenges and their own sets of strengths to draw from. So it has to be localized.
It's really interesting you say that, because in my own experience, which is only a few years old, not 25 years old, you find that the process can unlock what those root causes are.
Yes.
It has to be flexible enough to be able to go deeper in one or two compared to the others. And they're not as hard to find when the leaders start talking. So it's really touching a chord what you're saying. Now, anecdotally, we've heard that organizations have been placing, possibly and you referenced this, a far greater amount on learning and development since the start of COVID-19. And I'm curious to know, I think you have seen this, but not only, having seen it, but why do you think it is?
Yeah, it's been interesting because I thought when COVID hit, I thought, oh boy, right? It's going to stop and people need it now more than ever. And when I say now more than ever, I don't mean overwhelming people with needless training, right? That's just for the sake of training. I think why it's increased. And so it's increased in certain areas. So if we think about the impact that COVID is having on people, it's a stressor. People are feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. And leaders are feeling the brunt of not only, still maintaining performance and meeting the objectives of the organization, but also caring for their team of highly stressed, overwhelmed individuals who are adapting to a completely new way of working for the most part. And so what I have been seeing as far as why there's a greater focus on teamwork, because there's been a greater recognition during a crisis of the need to share the load, pull together, and adapt and be nimble. And in order to do that, the team needs to be well. We need to be well in mind, body, spirit. We need to learn how to be resilient. And so it does take a different type of leadership, character-based, values-based, people-based leadership to focus on things that are maybe more important now than they were before for some organizations, like the well-being and teamwork that's necessary to thrive in stressful, high change situations. And so we saw a significant shift to learning and development on teamwork, teams reconnecting to the culture that we need right now, and reconnecting to values and vision and goals and clarifying how we're really going to work together. We've also seen a shift in leadership and really developing the skills for leaders in leading self, in emotional intelligence, in how to demonstrate care for people, how to recognize and value and focus on the experience and the effort and not just the outcome, which is what people really need right now. And so, yes, we've seen an increase in learning and development over COVID in certain areas where there's a real need.
Right. Now, I'm most excited that you're taking the helm of the brand new Waterstone Culture Institute. So tell us a little bit of what people can expect in terms of the programming or the focus of it.
What will be most important, one of the most important things for the WC, the Waterstone Culture Institute, is impact, right? Is ensuring that when we engage with an organization, a team, to support them in building high performance teams and cultures, that it is impactful and it will result in changing behavior, shifting attitudes, whatever is needed to create the culture they're striving for, right? And so to ensure positive and measurable impact, the process is important. So what you can expect is not only deep content and research in support that organizations and teams need to develop themselves, their teams, their culture, but the process that will uncover root causes in a measurable, engaging way, that will drive the content and the experience for each particular team. That process that's experiential, that shifts the responsibility for change from the external to the team, and them taking ownership and accountability and are excited to do it, will be at the heart of this, right? So we can talk about research and content all day long, and we'll bring it. We will have the depth there. Just as important is that experience, so that the organization actually sees measurable change, because content will only take you so far.
Let me finish with this question, Nicole, and that is, what is the one piece of advice that you'd look to give to someone who's starting their high performance teams and culture leadership team journey at their own organization, whether they're starting one as an entrepreneur, they're engaged in one? What would you share with them that could make a big difference?
So my first piece of advice would be have a conversation, right? Have a conversation with your leadership team or the team you lead, and ask why. Why is this important to us? Why is high performance teams and a high performance culture important? Have that conversation around, why should we even be thinking about this? because that sense of ownership and exploration into the why and the benefits and the impact is a really important first step. And from that conversation, then after the why is, okay, well, what is it that we want to create together as a high performance team? What does high performance teamwork to us look like? So have a conversation with your team around the why, most importantly, and then reach out to a thought partner. And you know, Waterstone can be your thought partner. Reach out to a thought partner and begin to explore, what could this journey, this is why we want to do this. This is why it's important to us. And then explore what that journey could look like, because it'll be unique to your needs. So reach out to a thought partner as a second step.
Yeah, that's I think great advice. It was really interesting for you to describe today, and I'm so glad you did, how, you know, in a crisis, teamwork is needed possibly more than at any other time. You know, we do need others. And in a crisis, it's needed more than anyone else, or any other time possibly. But also, it's really that the possibly the biggest requirement in learning and development today is that it has an impact, and that it's experiential in how it is delivered and experienced, of course, but also that it's not a process that has necessarily a start and an end. It's almost the journey that you know, that has many stops on the way, but is continuous. And we use that word continuum. And that these trends of immense focus just in high performance teams and cultures, and that it requires a lot of character in order to do that. And I think those are the things that really resonated true, and maybe because I hear them so often, but hearing them in one conversation kind of stacks up nicely. And I think that's been a wonderful gift that you've given us today. But you are the gift for Waterstone that keeps on giving. So we're delighted that this is not going to be the last conversation. There will be many more, and couldn't be happier to have Nicole Bendaly as the leader, as our executive director of the Waterstone Culture Institute, to take us from good to great to beyond great. So thank you for joining me today, Nicole.
Thank you, Marty. It's always a pleasure. I look forward to continuing the conversation and great work. So thanks, Marty.
Thank you. And join us next week for another episode of Building High Performance Cultures. And in the meantime, if you'd like to learn more about the subject, this topic, or others, please visit waterstonehc.com.